Hello and welcome to round 10 of Grand Prix Portland here. On the left of our screen, Matthew Katz, Ben Yu and Jameson Painter. Up against, on the right of our screen, Eric Severson, Benjamin Weitz and Josiah Skallerup. On the left of our screen, the team of Katz, Yu and Painter, the only ones to go a perfect 9-0 record. Severson, Weitz and Skallerup, they had one draw in the mix, but still, technically undefeated. And we see here on the left of our screen, that's Ben Yu. He starts off with a Selfless Cathar, 1-1 for 1 there off just planes. On the right of our screen, thus far a mono green deck for Ben Weitz, but it looks like he has got islands in his deck.
Yeah, now looking on the left of the screen, Ben Yu actually has 2 copies of Triplicate Spirits in his hand. So we may be seeing a quick one here in game 1. Absolutely,
a Coral Barrier there, a perfectly reasonable blocker for Weitz here. He gets the 1-1 squid token. And 1-1 creatures that can just come down in abundance. One of the reasons that Oresca Swiftclaw, the 3-1 creature on turn 2 from Ben Yu, sometimes not quite as effective as it might be in some other formats.
Yeah, it's a card that on the surface seems like it'd be a great 2-drop, but when you're playing a format like M15 Limited, it's actually quite a bit worse than just a 2-2 for 2. On the other hand, Coral Barrier, the 3-drop played by Benjamin Weitz here, that is quite possibly one of the best blue commons available in this format, a card that was pretty low on people's pick orders early on that rose up very quickly as people started to realize its interactions with cards like Peel from Reality and how strong it is against the prevalence of 1 toughness creatures in this format.
And the River Marshal that's come from Ben Yu here, obviously very powerful. If he gets the island, then he's going to be able to use it to tap down creatures, but squids have island walk. Is something that we've come to learn in M15, and it's the sort of thing that the living totem that's come here from Ben Weitz, I'd be kind of tempted to make the squid a little bigger too, because it actually puts Ben Yu in a tricky situation in terms of working out what to tap down. Now he has pumped his Coral Barrier here, because immediately that means that he's just got an insane blocker. But now that Triplicate Spirits has been cast, we're in a situation where actually Ben Yu can say, well, I'm not really planning on attacking on the ground anymore. I've got a new path to victory, and that path to victory is in the sky.
Yeah, Triplicate Spirits, not so quietly, the best common in Magic 2015. We've seen it just completely run away with games. It combines with Sanctified Charge to end games as early as the 5th turn in this format. When people have them in multiples, it becomes especially difficult to win because they can attack with all of their spirits, even if there's a potential blocker in play that might eat one of them, and it just doesn't matter. The damage that comes through just becomes too much to handle.
I mean, at this point on the board, Ben Yu was just so many creatures that it's very, very straightforward for him to overwhelm here. Even though, he is stuck on 3 mana. I mean, it's something that Convoke sometimes leads us to kind of forget the land count that people have in play, because we've just seen Ben Yu cast a 6 mana spell, but he's had to tap his entire board down to do so. At some point, he is going to need to hit his 4th, his 5th land. Ultimately, one of the sort of litmus tests for the format is, has my opponent got up to 5 mana? Can they cast Sanctified Charge yet?
Definitely. There are cards at 4 mana also. For example, if you were to play Paragon of New Dawn on the following turn.
A card that I believe is actually in his hand.
Oh, is it?
Languishing
okay.
there, currently unable to be cast. We'll see whether or not he finds the land to cast it this very next turn. Yeah, Paragon of the New Dawns. Some of the Paragons are all about sort of the activated ability, or largely about the activated ability. Certainly true of Paragon of Fierce Defiance that gives haste. The white Paragon, because there's so many token generators in white, it's typically about just saying, look how big my team just got.
Yeah, I think the white Paragon is probably the best Paragon, even though its activated ability isn't quite as good as some of the others. Vigilance, obviously not as good as something like Haste when you're giving it to a specific creature, but the fact that you have so much token production in white, you're exactly right. It just makes it unbelievable. It combos with Raise the Alarm, with Triplicate Spirits, just a great card.
So Sunblade Elf here from Ben Yu off Yavimaya Coast, and another Triplicate Spirits. We can see here why he's gone with the Sunblade Elf rather than the Paragon that is in his hand, because basically he's setting up for next turn. He's got so many creatures in play there. There's one of them actually off the bottom of our screen now. We might see if we can just get that fixed so that everything's nice and clear. But next turn, basically he's saying, if I draw a land, Sunblade Elf is going to be able to pump my entire team. And that sets up one sort of expectation from Ben Weiss. What Weitz doesn't know is that there is the Paragon there to just say, one way or another, my team is going to get big. And you know, if worse comes to worse, there's also Selfless Cathar that's able to pump things up. And Weitz here with a tricky decision in terms of what he wants to kill, because he has ultimately said Hunt the Weak is going to kill off Dauntless River Marshal. I feel like the Elf might actually be a bigger threat here, though.
Yeah, it's a difficult decision. Sunblade Elf obviously very strong when he has all these tokens in play, but Dauntless River Marshal is definitely a worthwhile target. I am as surprised as you are, though, that we ended up seeing him make that decision.
I mean, I feel like Ben Weitz might almost be currently in the spot of saying, well, if you have Sanctified Charge, I'm dead. If you have various other sort of big mass pump effects that you can work in concert, I'm not looking super alive. I need to work for a plan that means that if the game goes long, I can possibly win. And when games go long with Dauntless River Marshal in play, it can get real messy real fast. And even though there wasn't the island in play to make the River Marshal a 3-2, that Yavimaya Coast, it does produce the blue mana that you can absolutely use the activated ability on it, and tapping things down at some point will definitely prove problematic for you.
Ooh, wow. So Pillar of Light there takes care of the Netcaster Spider, which had 4 toughness.
Yeah.
Thanks to Hunt the Weak, and now suddenly there's going to be no potential blocker for these 5 spirit tokens. And with a Sunblade Elf in play and a Paragon of New Dawn in hand, it looks like Ben Yu might quickly run away with this. Professor Ben at work.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting actually that sort of Weitz chose to put the +1/+1 counter on his Netcaster Spider. Often that's the right choice to say, you know, now means that even in the face of some of your tricks, so if there's a Titanic growth on the spirit that gets blocked by it, then the extra power that the Spider gets means that there'll still be a trade. But actually here, it just said, oh, you know that Pillar of Light? It now has the perfect target.
Exactly.
Divination here from Ben Weiss, drawing him a couple of cards. Picks up a couple of lands. Not the worst draws for him. He was a little bit land shy, and it does now mean that he's able to threaten potentially, Appeal for Reality, another spell on the turn now that he's passed back. But ultimately, he is, even though he's on 14 life right now, we kind of know that he's on the ropes, because there's the Paragon of New Dawns from Ben Yu. All of a sudden, all of his white creatures getting +1/+1. Those spirits on their own be able to attack Ben down to 4. And if the other creatures want to rumble in, then there's the potential to just threaten lethal this turn at least.
Yes. I mean, I don't think he's going to attack with everything, but even just attacking with the spirits, he puts Benjamin down to 4. And it's just looking very bad for Benjamin. He's going to need to play a Swamp and then have Appeal from Reality and a Fester Gloom, or some very strange series of events like that, if he's looking to actually win this game from here.
And Ben Yu will be, comparatively happy, because Jameson Painter on his team has already picked up a game against Josiah Skallerup. So, I mean, these matches, for you, those of you who are not so familiar with Team Sealed, the way it works is we've got 3 matches going on at the same time here. If the team on our left wins any 2 of those matches in total, so 2-0, 2-1, then that's the overall team series victory for them. You don't need to win all 3 matches, but you do need to win 2 of them. So sort of knowing that your teammates are doing well is a big sort of confidence booster, I suppose. And we see here that Ben Yu does get stuck in with basically his whole team. Loses a couple of creatures in the process. Selfless Cathar able to get through for a point, and Ben Weitz on just 2 now, so effectively his entire team is lethal right here.
Yeah, any single one of his creatures getting through would end up killing Benjamin Weitz. I really don't know what Benjamin could do here. Perhaps Aether Spouts could be used to achieve
I think
victory?
Aether Spouts is just about the only reset that it's likely that Ben Weitz could cast, and he's passed with just a blue and a green up, so realistically Ben Yu knows that the path is clear now. There's no real reason for him to play any more cards. He can just get stuck into the red zone, see what happens, almost certainly get the handshake for game 1, and go on to sideboarding and see what's going on in the other matches for his team.
And that's it for game 1. Benjamin Weitz picking up his cards here. Ben Yu up a game. His teammate, Jameson Painter, also up a game against Josiah Skallerup. And now we're probably going to be checking in on the match that's happening between Matthew Katz and Eric Severson.
Wow, there's been some rares doing some work over here. So there's a lot of mines in play. That is 4 mines in play. The question from Rashad Miller, our director, is that just luck? Because normally when you're laying mines with the Goblin Mine Layer, there's Goblin Kaboomist, sorry. You need to win a lot of coin flips to make that happen. If there's some way of pumping the toughness of Goblin Kaboomist, though, there's definitely the potential to get lots of mines in play much safer. So we've got 4 mines and a Siege Dragon. I would take that board.
I'd happily take that board.
But I mean, look at the other side, though. There's Ancient Silverback, which is big enough that it would take a lot of mines to kill, and they can regenerate even if you did want to send it through that minefield. And that a Tree Folk token from that's from Colonian.
Yes. Now it has the power and toughness equal to the number of forests that he controls, which is
6.
6 at this point. So he's got 2 very, very big threats on his side of the table, and Eric Severson, despite having 4 landmines in play
And a dragon. Never forget the dragon.
Yes, he might not be able to race these 2 giant fatties from Matthew Katz here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the right play here is saying, I need to commit more blockers to the board because the mines on their own are not going to be able to deal with threats this big. I mean, the tricky thing about those mines, they can only get activated on attackers during combat, which means that if Matthew Katz has a way of going over the top, if he casts a Titanic Growth in response to the 3rd mine, firstly, all those mines have done nothing, but secondly, his creature's now got that much more power. And it means that sort of just the mines on their own are not going to be good enough. You need to have blockers. And that there are Ranger's Guile on the Colonian Twingrove token before combat. So that means that it's not going to be able to be a target of those mines. Now, using the mines on the Ancient Silverback, if it's forced to regenerate, regeneration does remove it from combat. So kind of a sort of effective fog, I suppose. But using up all those mines to do so, not exactly what Eric Severson's really going to be wanting here.
And he's going to have to use a whole bunch of mines here if he wants to survive. But it looks like he might be dead anyway. I'm not sure what's his opponent's hands. I thought there might be a Titanic Growth, but from the looks of it, that's not what's up. Because I don't think he would have used Ranger's Guile pre-combat if he had Titanic Growth in hand.
That makes sense. I mean, Titanic Growth, if he did attack with the Twingrove and then sort of in combat use the Titanic Growth, there's timings that the mines can be used where it gets a little bit shakier.
That's true. And something you can also do is you can declare your blocks and then pass priority, and then after damage is dealt, you're still in combat and the creature is still attacking, so you can activate the landmines then.
Not a lot of help for Eric Severson in this exact situation, so you really can't afford to take too much damage, but yeah, in other circumstances, certainly an option. So the regen shield is just on the Ancient Silverback nice and early. Matthew Katz is saying, I'm not gonna tussle around too much. I'm just gonna put a bunch of regen shields on there. There's no way that Silverback's dying to any number of mines, and yeah, this is a close race that it feels to me like Matthew Katz is probably leading. And if he does win, that means that his team in a great spot, sweeping the first set of games and able to say, right, well, between the 3 of us, we need to win 2 more games to win this match.
But a chump blocker from Eric Severson, if Matthew Katz doesn't have another trick, that's just going to be enough for him to swing in for lethal in the air with this dragon twice more.
Yeah, the dragon a persistent threat, and the dragon obviously a very, very powerful card in the format. In there is follow-up for it, and it's a Flesh to Dust on that Ancient Silverback. Now, Flesh to Dust does not allow regeneration, so
no, it does not.
Ancient Silverback, as much as it's put in all that work regenerating from all the mines, just running through and saying, I don't care, the Flesh to Dust there, providing an out to Eric Severson, because 6 forests in play, even if there's a 7th forest, Severson on 8 life. This is a really tight race.
Does Severson have, or does Katz have an answer to this dragon, or will this attack step be the end of him? That's the question we have to ask ourselves right now.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, it's worth noting that actually we've seen this game a lot of rares coming into play, sort of this the kind of top end of the quality of people's decks, and an Inferno Fist on the dragon there. Insult to injury, really, it feels to me on that in that sort of. I don't know if I'd have really wanted to show off the Inferno Fist in game 1 when it feels like I'm winning that game anyway.
I think he was just afraid of some random life gain activity going on. Just wants to maximize the amount of damage he's outputting here.
A fair choice. So we can see that just the one match going on right this moment, and that being the one between Benyu and Benjamin Weitz, the battle of the Bennies. So but it looks like we've got another match about to start. And we've not seen anything of Jameson Painter and Josiah Skallerup, given that their game was the one that finished first. If we want to get a look in, this is probably our best opportunity to do so. So let's see if we can see how that game goes from the very get-go. Josiah Skallerup there, starting off with an island, a swamp from Jameson Painter. And this is where our blue-white stacks ended up on the right-hand side of our screen. So Josiah Skallerup there with the plains and the island, but no early plays. Now, often that signals a raise the alarm. In this case, it hasn't been the case. Are those Urza Saga swamps on the other side of the board there?
It looks like
One
they
of
are.
my favourite sets of swamps there. Anyone in the chat can help me out on that. That's definitely a Saga Mountain.
Yes, that is a Saga Mountain. So he brought his own lands. Classy. I like it.
Hushwing Griff there, end of turn from Eric Severson, facing down against a Witch's Familiar. He'll be able to attack in the air quite happily. 1 toughness, certainly not as big a deal when you're a flyer, and gets to peck in there with the Griff, which also makes coming into play abilities work a little differently.
Yeah, I mean, they don't trigger anymore, so one of the things that's nice about Hushwing Griff is it's a lot stronger than some of the other 1-toughness creatures in this format, because cards like Forge Devil don't deal with it so efficiently, and it turns off the other cards that punish 1-toughness creatures like Coral Barrier. So just in general, 1-toughness creatures are pretty weak in this format, but Hushwing Griff gets around so many of the things that make them weak that it actually is quite strong.
And actually, white, probably the colour with the fewest coming into play abilities on creatures.
It's as if that was planned.
They figured it out. Aaron Forsyth's in the building. We can thank him for that one later on. A Child of Night here from Matthew Katz. The Midnight Guard there coming down for Severson as we were talking. The Midnight Guard, kind of a strong one, because often it functionally kind of has vigilance if you want it to, because it untaps when you play a creature, when your opponents play creatures. Really not very difficult at all to end up with it able to hang back on blocks if needed.
Yeah, and one of the things that's really nice about that is that you can convoke something out, and then when it comes into play, it actually untaps the Midnight Guards, and you can still use it during combat. Just a really efficient card for this format. Also, just 2 3s for 3 are great here.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of efficiency, Dauntless Riverguard there, 3-2 for 2 effectively, thanks to the fact that Eric Severson has the island in play. He's got the mana up that next turn he's going to be able to use it to start tapping down creatures. And in any kind of a tight race whatsoever, having the tapper on the board that's also able to get stuck in and fight if it wants to, a very decisive threat.
Eric Severson choosing not to play his Oresco Swiftclaw there, instead playing around cards like Fester Gloom. Perhaps he's also afraid of playing this cat against Matthew Katz, afraid that it might betray him.
Flavor, always important, and Fester Gloom here, able to kill off the Hushwing Griff, not able to deal with the Riverguard thanks to the fact there's an island in play for Eric Severson.
Yeah, great play by Eric Severson there. We saw him sandbag that Oresco Swiftclaw, and here he gets rewarded by baiting out that Fester Gloom and still having an extra threat in his hand.
Patient play there, but it looks like there's more removal from Matthew Katz. I mean, it's a red-black deck, so it's certainly likely to have plenty of it. Ulcerate there, dealing with the River Marshal, but still more threats coming from Eric Severson there.
You know, it looks like Matthew Katz definitely still has additional removal beyond that in his hand. Your opponent has the pumping leg, it often means that, oh, they're strong, and maybe it wasn't removal, maybe it was just an actual Soul of Innistrad.
Now, Soul of Innistrad, I mean, all of the souls very, very powerful. This one, I think, is the one that I've seen feel most egregious when it's in play, because it gets back so many creatures from the graveyard.
So fast. I mean, if you're playing a long game, it becomes really difficult to win. Your opponent's able to grind out so much card advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it at its best, which is in green-black, where graveyards get filled very, very easily. But even in black-red, it's just a massive threat that causes all sorts of trouble. Covenant of Blood there doing great work dealing with the biggest flyer on the board that Eric Severson just played there, letting him get stuck in with his entire team and gaining Katz for life. I mean, it's something that we saw be decisive in a lot of matches yesterday, and nothing's changed.
Very high energy here from Matthew Katz, just running his opponent over here with a Witch's Familiar and a Soul of Innistrad.
Yeah, he won game one fast. You can see that he kind of wants to do the same here. As much as Nemesis of the Isles are there flying over, and there's a Frostlinks to slow him down a little bit, Matthew Katz, he's got a lot going on, and even though there's a cat on the other side of the board now in Oreska Swiftclaw, I have to think he feels reasonable about his position.
Definitely, that Soul can potentially just run away with this game at this point.
Yeah, I mean, what it means is that Matthew Katz can, you know, if he wants to aggressively trade, he can do, and it really doesn't hurt him too much at all. All it costs him is time. So he pays 5 mana, gets back Child of Night, recasts it. Effectively, he's saying that every turn that he doesn't draw a creature, if there's a creature in his graveyard, he kind of does.
Exactly. You just get to fill your hand up constantly. You never run out of gas. Even when the Soul dies, it still brings back 2 additional cards later on in the game. It's just such a card advantage house here.
The house that Soul of Innistrad built. I'm guessing that's kind of a creepy cabin in the woods, right? Innistrad, of course, very much the horror block.
Yeah, fun flavor there in Innistrad.
Absolutely. I mean,
vampires and werewolves.
Form and function working together to create a great set. My favorite set, actually, of all time. Especially Triple Innistrad Draft. I still have box of it sat at home ready, just so that I know.
Yes, that was so much fun. I mean, every single card was playable.
Yeah. I think I literally played every single card at some point in that format. But in the meantime, Eric Severson has decided that he's got to get busy with the attacks. Swings in where he can and threatens some kind of a trick. There's the Sanctified Charge, basically meaning that he's not losing creatures to this attack, and he is able to kill off some of Matthew Katz. Is basically playing a tempo game here, saying, yes, you can get some creatures back, but you can't get them all back immediately, and I'm going to try and beat you before you can really leverage that Soul of Innistrad too much.
Yeah, that Frostlinks is dead. Oh no, +2/+1. Never mind.
Yep, there we go.
Yep.
Kept everything alive. A very powerful Sanctified Charge, though basically they kind of always are.
Yeah, Sanctified Charge generally wins games like that. But from the looks of it, it actually seems like that Sanctified Charge might have been enough to swing this race into Eric Severson's favor, despite him just getting run over in the early game here by Witch's Familiar and Soul of Innistrad. Pecking away, getting that big tempo advantage off Frostlinks, it might have just been enough for him to win this game.
So yeah, Soul of Innistrad getting through where it can, but with just a Child of Night to block, I mean, the life gain from Child of Night here is going to be really important.
Definitely.
And last turn, the life gain wasn't doing a whole lot because of the first strike granted by Sanctified Charge.
Yeah, interesting blocking choice there last turn. I mean, obviously he wanted to block the 2/2 with the 2/3 because it seemed efficient, but his opponent making that attack, I think it definitely signals that there's a Sanctified Charge coming from the other end. So perhaps he should have put the Child of Night in front of the Frostlinks so that he still could have gained the life, because the Sanctified Charge only gives first strike to white creatures.
Yeah, one of those things that sort of, if he'd seen it coming, then I think that that would have been the correct block, but it's one of those things that there's a lot of different things to consider in this format, and a small edge, but I mean, games are won and lost on small edges.
And he's still playing this game very well. It's just putting out one instance in which he might have been able to grind up a small advantage.
But I mean, Matthew Katz, he's playing a red-black deck. There's plenty of opportunity for him to draw removal here, and there's not very much removal needed. to close this game out on the other side of things. It's going to be very, very close. He's attacking with his Child of Night here, which basically means that he's saying, I'm almost certainly going to gain 2 life here, at which point your ability to kill me is kind of tough. So he...
I think it also might just mean that he has Lightning Strike.
Called it. Good job, Jacob Van Loonham, and good job, Matthew Katz, because you've just won the first match for your team up against Eric Severson. So Matthew Katz now gets to sit back, and he's not just going to watch these games, though. He has the opportunity to interject and provide a little bit of advice to his teammates if he wishes, and if they wish, I guess. But we're now moving across to one of our other matches here. So this is the match between, on the left of our screen, this is Ben Yu. And on the other side, we've got Benjamin Weitz. The Battle of the Bennies is still going on. And it looks like Soldier theme deck for Benjamin Yu. He's got Preeminent Captain. He's got Kinsbell Skirmisher. He's got Oresco Swiftclaw. All soldiers. The
Is Oresco Swiftclaw a soldier?
I believe so, a cat soldier. Okay, maybe a warrior. But Preeminent Captain does have the ability to, when you attack with it, you can put extra soldiers into play attacking. But a Sanctified Charge here from Matthew Katz, meaning that his team, for Ben Yu, meaning that his team is substantially larger all of a sudden, able to successfully block a Siege Worm and first strike it to death without losing anything at all. Not so often you see the defensive Sanctified Charge, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
And Siege Worm, very strong against these token white strategies. It just does such a great job of pounding its way through. It's just so big.
And if the first Siege Worm doesn't get you, the second one...
Yes.
Well, that's one you need to worry about. And so Ben White's able to follow up the first Siege Worm with a second one there, convoking it out just a little bit with a Wall of Mulch and that Netcaster Spider. And that means that his board's still looking pretty formidable.
Siege Worm continues to rumble into the red zone here.
Yeah, I mean, Ben White's... I mean, this is the power of having a gigantic creature, is that his plays can be kind of scripted, but in a way that he's not really going to get punished for. That. I mean, that Siege Worm is going to come in. It's either going to do a bunch of damage, great, kill off some of your opponent's creatures, fantastic, or draw out a trick from your opponent, and you've still got all of your mana untapped to potentially respond to that.
Yeah, that again, this format, 5/5 tramples are absolutely wonderful. That's one of the reasons why Glacial Crasher is such a big incentive to play blue-red. Siege Worm, one of the best green commons available. There are a lot of cards that deal 4 damage, cards like Covenant of Blood and Stoke the Flames. Siege Worm conveniently goes above all of that, while also providing you something that actually gets through Triplicate Spirits.
And we saw there Jace's Ingenuity at the end of the turn from Ben Weitz, and it looks like he's got a third Siege Worm. He's just drawn another one. It was the last card off that Jace's Ingenuity. He filtered past a couple of lands, and this third one, I mean, is going to really put a hurt on Ben Yu. It's one of those things where basically, matchup-wise, it produces a difficult situation for Ben Yu. Forced here to double block. I mean, this will get the trade, but equally it will allow a small amount of trampling over the top. And Ben Yu, he's given up a 2-for-1 because he needs to protect his life total, and now he's going to get a chance to see what's coming next. And it's a fairly repetitive tune that Ben Weitz is singing, but it's still a good one. I'm actually interested here to see that he's starting off with a Coral Barrier, but because Convoke is a thing, it's not actually holding up his ability to play the Siege Worm as well.
And this is one of the things about the blue-green archetype is once it gets into the late game, especially against a white deck, it's just going to be able to play threat after threat. And with cards like Jace's Ingenuity being played, other card draw spells being played, you're just going to have a much bigger board once the game gets to the point where you can do that. Ben Yu, his deck has the ability to just completely run his opponent over with cards like Triplicate Spirits, Paragon of New Dawn, Sanctified Charge. But if he doesn't have that early game that's necessary here, then he's just going to be in a world of hurt against a deck like Ben Weitz's.
And a nice little synergy available to Ben Weitz if he wants it. He's got a Wall of Mulch there. And now Wall of Mulch doesn't say sacrifice it, draw a card. It says sacrifice a wall. So that Coral Barrier, it is a wall, I believe, which means that potentially Ben Weitz, if he even sniffs that he might be beginning to get low on cards, he can just grab a bunch more. Another double block there on Siege Worm. finally sort of filtering through the siege worm part of this game. That squid, unblockable for Bennu. He has got islands in play, but now it's a matter of what kind of a follow-up Ben Weitz has, because the rest of his creatures, yes, they've got nothing much that's left to block them, but at the same time, they're not nearly as formidable.
Definitely. I think that at this point, Ben Weitz is just so ahead on cards, it's going to be extremely difficult for him to lose. But I think at this point, he just doesn't want to play any more cards. Bennu, obviously, had this been a game 3, he might have just already scooped it up. But because you're playing a team, and maybe in a 1v1 tournament setting anyway, in a team format, you really want to get as much information about your opponent's deck as possible. If you write down the tricks you see, the removal spells you see, then that information can be used by you and your teammates on subsequent games, and often to great effect. So just playing the game, staying alive as long as possible, seeing what your opponent plays, it gives you a better idea of how you can sideboard. And the sideboards for these decks are quite strong when they're working with 12 packs.
Yeah, I mean, the way it works building decks in this format is that because you have so many packs, your decks always look like these super awesome draft decks, and your sideboards have pretty much most of the cards that you want. And that's something that you have to kind of prepare for when you're building your decks, is that you know that if your opponent is in black, they have a Festigaloon probably somewhere. If they're in white, they have a Solemn Offering somewhere. There's lots of sort of question marks that you might have in regular Limited that absolutely come up in Team Limited. So a chance to jump across here and see Jameson Painter against Josiah Skallerup. Josiah Skallerup up a game, and look how busy these boards are. Colonian Twin Groves there, both it and its twin in play, so both 5/5s at present, and likely only to get bigger. We've got Siege Worm, we've seen the power of the 5/5s in this format, all in play over on Jameson Painter's side of things.
He also has Yisan, the Wandering Bard, and that card can grind out a massive advantage if it stays in play for a number of turns.
Yeah, Yisan currently at 2 counters. Looks likely that it might be able to get up to 3, because I mean, it's certainly not going to trouble itself with getting into the red zone when there's other creatures that can do that for it. There is 1 mine in play thanks to Goblin Kaboomist, though Goblin Kaboomist very much in the graveyard. Looks like the coin flips didn't quite go the way of Josiah Skallerup this game. And while the mine's in play, that Scrapyard Mongrel is a 5/3, so it is able to trade with some of these bigger creatures on Jameson Painter's side of the board. The fact it's an artifact, very, very important for that reason.
Definitely.
So it looks like Skallerup's happy to say, you know what, let's kill off the Siege Worm where we can. I'll take a couple of points of trample. I can take my points from the Colonian Twin Groves token.
Yeah, but it's a slow grind at this point, because as more forests come down, those Twin Groves are just going to grow and grow. And the Siege Worm's trample is certainly relevant, and I would recommend trading the Scrapyard Mongrel here. But at this point, it looks like this match is also going to be evened up. But Altec Bloodseeker can get +2/+0 and First Strike if there's a removal spell, and it's a speed removal spell in Josiah Skallerup's hands. So,
and after a little bit of thinking, Josiah says, yeah, I'll take my hits this turn. I'll pick my battles elsewhere. I mean, dangerous when those tree folk are only going to get bigger, but you know, that's the choice he's made. That's what he's going to live with.
Well, the tree folk will become 6/6s next turn, and I think what his ultimate plan there is to perhaps kill the 1 Twin Grove, making his Altec Bloodseeker a 4-power First Striker, then using the mine to deal 2 damage to the other tree folk, and then block with the 4-power First Striker. That way he's able to acquire a 2-for-1 with the removal spell, dealing with both halves of the Twin Grove. And while it's not actually a 2-for-1, because the Twin Grove is just 1 card, when you're looking at a pair of 6/6s on the other end of the table, and you're able to deal with both of them via a single card, it feels like a 2-for-1.
You'll take it.
Like, we will take it, exactly.
Sometimes you just need to do what you need to do. And we see there a Flesh to Dust to kill off Yisan. He gets to get 1 last activation in. But, yeah, killing Yisan, another piece of the puzzle, and one that is not going to be solved by landmines. So,
and Jameson Painter, as he was sifting through his deck there, I saw a Chandra Pyromaster.
Ooh,
wow,
nice
an invasive species here, going to return that Colonian Twin Grove back to his hand so he can cast it again, make another 5/5, potentially a 6/6 on the following turn. Just a game getting completely out of hand here for Josiah Skallerup.
I'm a big fan of invasive species and its ilk in this format. There's a few different ways of returning your own creatures to their hand, to your hand, and getting value. I mean, many of them are in blue. I mean, you've got Quickling, you've got Peel from Reality, but Roaring Primodox and invasive species both doing great work because there's a lot of really good coming into play abilities in green in this format. With
Yeah,
the Twin Grove probably being at the top of that curve.
my personal favorite interaction there is using invasive species alongside auras and Broodkeeper. I like making dragons.
I mean, I don't think anyone would fault you for that. And Broodkeeper, a card that I've actually not really had a huge amount of experience casting myself. I've been on the wrong side of it though, and it's not very much fun whatsoever. So Jameson Painter having a look at his hand. It looks like there's a lightning strike in there, but there's obviously the temptation to just get that Twin Grove back into play, get another token, and just put a hurt on Josiah Skallerup with some massive creatures to attack in the red zone. Rotfeaster Maggot being taken down here by Hunt the Weak there from Jameson Painter. Puts a +1/+1 counter on the Tree Folk. For what it's worth, it's now even more gigantic. It's now a 6/6.
Interesting here that Jameson chose to tap one of his mountains there. That's going to prevent him from being able to use Inferno Fist and activate it on the same turn. However, he's really far ahead at this point, and with his opponent tapped out, he really doesn't have anything to fear here.
And so, a couple of creatures coming in now. He is attacking with creatures here that, in principle, could be killed off by landmine. Do we think that basically he knows that the landmine needs to be used on bigger and better things, so he can kind of get a value attack in here?
I think so. Also, his
his
opponent is tapped out, so his opponent can't do a play like sacrifice my landmine, kill your Shaman of Spring, and then give my Altek Bloodseeker +2/+0 on first strike and block your invasive species, which would be amazing if he could do that. So he's taking the opportunity to get in when he can with these specific creatures. On follow-up turns, when he's able to use his larger creatures more efficiently, he might make a much different attack.
So Josiah Skallerup onto 6 lands now, gets a little hit in with his Carrion Crow. These points certainly counting. I mean, with Jameson Painter on 10 life, I mean, if it reaches the point where Skallerup's able to get that Siege Worm, get that Siege Dragon doing its thing again, then potentially an interesting one. But ooh, this is an interesting addition that certainly combines quite well with the landmine. Yeah, so Kirkesh is a very cool legend from M15. Kirkesh Onake Ancient. Whenever you activate the ability of an artifact, if it isn't a mana ability, then you can pay a red, and if you do copy that ability, you can choose new targets if you want. So suddenly, that landmine, effectively 2 landmines, though unfortunately for Skallerup this turn, he doesn't have access to enough red mana to be able to make that all happen.
Yeah, Kirkesh, a cruel mistress, having 2 red mana symbols in the casting cost there. That's a pretty fun combo, though. I haven't seen that one come up yet. The Kaboomis Kirkesh.
I mean, you need 2 rares in M15, and realistically, it's kind of more of a limited combo than a constructed one.
Oh, definitely not a constructed combo. Still, though, it is a powerful interaction.
And so we see here a couple of creatures coming in. We got the big Tree Folk getting blocked by the tiny devil, while invasive species just does his thing. Josiah Skallerup here, still maintaining a relatively healthy life total, but it's questionable how long that can really last for. Inferno Fist here coming down for Jameson Painter after combat and immediately getting thrown at that Carrion Crow so it can't peck in for any more points of damage.
Yes, I mean, Jameson Painter's life total was dwindling a bit, and with that flyer in play, it really just gave Josiah Skallerup a window to victory. He could have had any burn spell in conjunction with something like Lava Axe, and that would have been enough for him to take the game away.
Charging Rhino coming down for Jameson Painter. That the 4/4 that can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. Now, there's only really 1 creature on Josiah Skallerup's side of the board that that's going to be able to block easily unless the landmine starts killing things.
Yeah, we're going to need to switch over to match B here because it could be potentially the end of the match right now.
All right, so we're jumping across because, yeah, this very much in the balance. Only 1 more win needed for Ben Yu to completely close this game out, and we've got, or close the entire series out, sorry. Preeminent Captain joined by Oreska Swiftclaw on his side of the board. On the other side of the board, we've got a Living Totem. It's already put a +1/+1 counter on that Netcaster Spider. And yeah, kind of in the balance a little bit here, but we know that these white decks can sometimes just spring wins out of nowhere with the likes of Sanctified Charge. So that's the reason that we've jumped across to this match, just so we can make sure that if the match does end, then we're looking in the right direction.
Correct. It'd be odd to be covering one game and then for the match to suddenly be over. Right, and Seder Wayfinder there from Benjamin Weitz. Now, that, again, a card that's surprisingly strong in this format. Now, the 1/1 body, not particularly relevant, but it does some work chump blocking. In green, you can make it bigger with things like Living Totem. It works well with the Paragon. Then it also finds you a land and works toward Convoke. So it's kind of this weird kind of card advantage.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that I think that a lot of us, when we first saw M15, were looking at Elvish Mystic and saying, well, it's always been a good green common, it's still going to be a good green common. In point of fact, the 1/1 that taps for 1 mana is not that different to any other 1/1 when Convoke's around. And
very true.
Yeah, Seder Wayfinder, in many cases, a better fit for many decks.
Yeah, Elvish Mystic in the past has been pretty easily one of the better commons available in any given set, but here in M15, it's just okay. Cards like Netcaster Spider and Living Totem, things like that, are often picked over it.
Now, we've just had a big rare hit the board. On the left-hand side of our screen, just at the bottom there, Ben Yu has cast Severson Guardian Angel, 5/4 flying vigilance for 5. Pay 1 on a white to prevent all damage that be dealt to another target creature this turn by sources of the color of your choice. And pay 5 colorless and white. So not something that Ben Yu can afford to do just yet, to prevent all damage to be dealt to target player this turn by sources of the color of your choice. Now, at the moment, Ben Weitz, all of his damage sources are green, and that means that it's very, very straightforward for, assuming that Ben Yu can get appropriate mana, for him to set up a situation where Ben Weitz just not really able to deal any damage. While he's setting up that situation, he's got a 5/4 Vigilant Flyer that, assuming he can deal with that Netcaster Spider, is going to be quite a problem.
Yeah, I mean, his life total is 12, though, and his opponent does have a very formidable board. This game could still go either way. And in that Jameson Painter Josiah Skallerup match, Josiah Skallerup must have killed Jameson Painter out of nowhere, able to take that game. And now the match hangs in the balance. This game will decide who will remain undefeated here.
And a big pillar of light there from Ben Yu, able to deal with that Netcaster Spider, clearing a path. Averson's getting stuck in. All of a sudden, we've got a proper game on our hands because Ben Weitz doesn't have the defenses that he needs against that Angel. And if Ben Yu just draws land, once he's got a couple more lands in play, he's going to be in a virtually unassailable position.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's going to be enough time at this point, but the race is on, and it looks to be in Ben Yu's favor at this point.
That said, I've just seen an Ether Spouts in Benjamin Weitz' hands.
That certainly changes things.
Ether Spouts taking all attacking creatures and giving your opponent Sophie's choice. Is it going on the top of my deck? Is it going on the bottom of my deck? But all of those creatures are getting off the board, and the draws for the next few turns are just going to be those creatures if you want to keep them at all. And that, a huge pickup for Ben Weitz. Not quite sure how long he's had that, but Ben Yu likely to just be attacking with Severson, so potentially not as disrupted by it as he might be if he were attacking with the entire squad.
I imagine that Benjamin Weitz, though, is going to be holding that Aether Spouts for the specific turn in which it would be killing him. He would be dying. So on this turn, Benjamin Weitz probably expects just an attack from Severson, but on the following turn, that's when Ben is going to try to, that's when Ben Yu is probably going to try to use something like Sanctified Charge and actually get the lethal blow. And at that point, he'll be able to fire with Aether Spouts.
Yeah, so this turn, very much a setup turn for Ben Weitz. We saw him there casting a Living Totem, casting a couple of other creatures, just basically developing his board such that when he gets a point to cast the Ether Spouts and potentially just wreck Ben Yu, he's got an amazing Alpha Strike the following turn.
Definitely. I'm actually very surprised that he didn't attack there with his Siege Worm.
As it is, though, that is what it is. He's down to just 6 life. An extra creature committed to the board by Bennu. And as it's a flyer, potentially another attacker next turn. So he will have a lethal attack the following turn. So Ben Weitz is kind of scripted now that he's unlikely to be casting too many more threats this turn, keeping up mana for that Aether Spouts. It's just a matter of how much attacking he's going to be doing.
And here comes Siege Worm now on this turn.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that if he was going to have attacked with Siege Worm this turn, then last turn he probably should have done 2. Looks like he's going to be able to secure a couple of kills here. I mean, he's got 6 power to deal trample damage with here. He's got...
Yeah, it's 6 points of toughness, so he's actually just going to trade his Siege Worm for 3 of his opponent's creatures, and then he has Aether Spouts in hand, so when Bennu goes for the kill on the following turn, he has the necessary answer.
And what do we have here to potentially stymie that plan? A Titanic Growth would be pretty impressive here. He's using Severson to prevent some of the damage to some of his creatures, so it's not going to be the straightforward 3-for-1.
Yes.
He gets to keep 1 creature alive. He chose the Midnight Guide, which seems like a solid choice.
Definitely, just the 3 toughness, much more important than whatever else he might have been able to do there. And we're not sure if Bennu knows about this Aether Spouts. I don't think he's seen it in previous games. So it might just be a huge blowout here.
I mean, it's a moderate-sized blowout, I would say. It's probably about accurate. I don't think that, even if he knew about it, I don't think that Bennu could really have done too much differently there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's definitely priced into that play. His opponent's at 6. He's attacking for lethal in the air. His opponent has no flyers. He's playing against a green deck. His opponent has a huge attacking force on the other side of the table. He just can't afford to do anything else.
So he plays another Midnight Guard here, knows that next turn he's drawing Severson. For now, again, I mean, previously we were saying, oh, is he going to draw 7 lands? Now we're just sort of saying, is he going to be able to stay alive for long enough to leverage that Severson to get back into the winning position that he was in mere moments ago?
And it looks like Bennu actually has time, because these 2/3 bodies are pretty strong in the current situation.
Big attacks here from Ben Weitz. It looks like Bennu very quick to work out, well, these are the guys who are presenting damage that I can actually block and trade here and not lose too much. Ben Weitz says, well, you know, I don't have any extra tricks. You can take your damage. 6 points each. Let's see who wins. And there's a Coral Barrier, which there's no islands on Bennu's side of the board this game. Research Assistant joining the force of Ben Weitz here. Really, really close games.
Yeah, these games have been super tight.
So Severson's back down.
Ooh, and that's Hunt the Week here.
Now Hunt the Week will be enough to kill off Severson, assuming that there's any 3. Yeah, there's just the 1 3-power creature on Ben Weitz's side of the board, so he is going to be able to kill off Severson if he wants to, which I'm guessing he probably does.
I imagine. It seems relevant to his interest. I think he also has Encrust in hand, though, and Severson seems like a very nice target for that. I mean, it kind of got stranded there because it's terrible against Midnight Guard, but...
I mean, Encrust's a funny one because it will stop Severson's abilities, but Severson has... Oh, it taps
it when it comes into play.
Cast it.
Yeah.
Hunt the Week, though, the safer option, just saying, get ye gone.
Yeah, definitely the safer of the 2 plays, Hunt the Week.
So 6 life each. This, a very tight race, and I believe that both creatures went to the top for Bennu, so not a massive surprise to see that Geist back there, the 3/1 flyer.
And that Squid, the Island Walk, potentially very strong as this game progresses, but at this point, Bennu without an island in play. He does have a blue card in hand, though.
It's kind of a strong incentive to not play the island if he doesn't have to, and I mean, the blue card in his hand is an Amphin Pathmage, which is a tricky one because the activated ability also requires blue mana, so you kind of want to cast it and then immediately use it. That requires 2 islands, though, which means that you're going to be taking some Island Walk hits. So there's the Encrust. The Geist gets 1 hit in, but is not going to get a chance to do lethal damage. And Wall of Mulch there from Ben Weitz. He's still got Jace's Ingenuity in hand, so plenty of card drawing options for him. great when you're at this sort of last dash to the finish line. Coral Barrier getting sacrificed to the Wall of Mulch to draw another card.
In this game, completely down to the wire at this point.
The card advantage engine is very much real for Ben Weitz, and you have to say that that has the potential to be decisive here. He has got more points of damage that he needs to deal, but drawing extra cards is a great way of finding a way of making that happen.
Definitely. I mean, when these games go long, when the boards get gummed up, that's when a card like Jason's Ingenuity really has the ability to shine. So,
loads of extra cards for Ben Weitz, but not really drawing into anything that's going to close the game out right this moment. Oreskos Swiftclaw there for Ben Yu. Another Encrust Ben Weitz has, though. So, I mean, the Midnight Guard's absolutely the perfect creature to have in the face of someone who's drawing a lot of Encrusts. While Encrust taps things down, Midnight Guard, one of the most easy creatures to untap imaginable.
It's triggered ability. It still untaps.
Yeah, just because the activated abilities of a Midnight Guard can't be activated, it actually doesn't have any. The triggered ability means that even if it gets tapped down by Encrust, it can get untapped by its own ability when a creature comes into play. Oh, I'm sorry, Encrust doesn't tap the creature when you first put it into play even, so realistically, it wouldn't have been a great answer to Severson. So
oh yes, that's definitely true.
Jolly good, we figured it out. Thanks, chat. Keeping us honest. And that there, a chief engineer for Benjamin Weitz. Not entirely sure that he's got a huge amount of artifacts to make cheap, but it is a 1/3 body, which potentially a useful blocker in this sort of situation. So many squid. At this point, there's no possible way that we're going to see any islands played by Ben Yu, because effectively that means that he's signing his own death warrant. And that means that various cards stranded in the hand of Ben Yu, he's going to have to think very carefully here, though he does have his entire team to provide him with support in terms of what the right decisions are going forward. Divination in hand for Ben Weitz.
Additional card draw here, just completely closing this game out.
I mean, even just Research Assistant that he has in play is enough that he was likely to have better cards than his opponent. But yeah, the Divinations, the Jason's Ingenuities, meaning that there's a huge amount of inevitability at this point for Ben Weitz, and he has now drawn a sweet Siege Worm, which is going to be yet another way of just securing card advantage by saying you have to deal with this, and the only way you can do so is by blocking with multiple creatures.
Yeah, the Siege Worm here is just going to get through for... It's not going to be able to get through the board on the other side, but a triple block will mean that he's at least going to take out 2 of the creatures on the other end of the table, and now his board is just so big that he's able to just pretty easily win. The Infant Pathmage that's in Ben Yu's hand, essentially stranded there now for the remainder of the game, because if he does, in fact, play an island, then suddenly the squid on the other end of the table gain island walk, and then he's just essentially dead. He could potentially play it off something like a Yavimaya Coast, but at this point the board is just getting too big on the other side.
So time has just been called on the round, so actually this is turn 0. If someone's going to win this match, they're going to have to do something big soon. And okay, there's a couple of extra turns just because of a couple of delays. There's 7 turns. The team of Eric Severson, Ben Weitz, and Josiah Skallerup, they already have a draw in this tournament. It's quite easy, especially once you get to these last games where they're all tied up. You've effectively got 3 players providing information on both sides for things to take a little bit of extra time.
Yeah, the turns end up taking longer, the decisions are more complicated, because you have so much more information. You know what cards are in the other people's decks, you know what cards you're not going to see. And at this point, with 4 blockers on Ben Yu's side of the board and a potential 8 attackers on Benjamin Weitz's side of the board, things are looking really good for Benjamin Weitz, but he's going to have to find a way to win this game in the time frame available.
We saw there a brief shot of the cluster of players around each side of this board. Lots and lots of information being exchanged, but like you have to be very, very careful not to try and give too much of that information to your opponents by sort of, you draw a card and suddenly there's a big huddle and a big conversation. It's like, well, okay. Are they grandstanding, or did they in fact draw the exact right spell?
So they're coming in. Here comes the team. 6 attackers coming in here for Benjamin Weitz, leaving back a pair of squid and a wall of mulch. Ooh, and the defensive sanctified charge from Ben Yu. This could swing the game in Ben Yu's favor.
I mean, it seems very, very likely to, because all of his creatures are white. They've all got +2 power, +1 toughness, first strike. He's basically just going to eat all of Ben Weitz's best creatures, and he's going to take a small amount of damage, but it is a small amount of damage. And in the meantime, he now has a much better chance of being able to swing back in a meaningful fashion. At the point that Ben Weitz attacked, there was a much better chance that he was going to be able to kill off a few creatures and mean that the alpha strike back wasn't going to be quite as powerful.
And that attack from Benjamin Weitz, had he had something like Titanic Growth, he could have won the game there. Puts Ben Yu down to 4. But here, Ben Yu now with 4 attackers in the face of just 3 blockers, with his opponent at 3. It's very reasonable to imagine a state of affairs in which he's able to win this game.
So Ben Yu sitting, hand on the table, talking to his teammates. The Midnight Guards are the easiest attack, because if he's got any kind of a creature, they're just going to be able to get to untap again. So Ben Weitz says, right, I'll block one of them with my wall of mulch. I want to keep around those squid because I want to be able to threaten unblockable damage next turn. Ben Weitz dropping to 1. No trick from Ben Yu, but he does have a triplicate spirits, which means that he's got lots more creatures next turn. 1 life, all of his creatures presenting lethal damage, 3 of them flying. I don't think that we're going to run out of turns on this one.
Yeah, Ben Yu able to turn that around. Beautifully played from his end. The defensive sanctified charge seen twice in that match.